Hello student, welcome back to Arunava class. So today we start our NEET part, that means the NEET syllabus, that is the most important one chapter, that is the sexual reproduction of the flowering plants. This chapter is very important in the NEET point of view because two questions generally come from this chapter. Right? So you are ultimately very conscious about this chapter and learn every topic, right? So we are divided this chapter into the fourth topic. That means first topic we discuss about the male part. That means it is the sexual reproduction. That means in here the involved in the male and female parts is there. So today we discuss about the male part. So the sexual reproduction is a flowering plant is the most common process in where the variation is coming, and the most important part, it is the flower which is participate in that particular topic, right? So sexual reproduction of flowering plants, generally all flower plants like the angiosperm show the sexual reproduction because the angiosperm also we call the flowering plant, that means they have the flower for their reproduction purpose. The plants have the two parts. One is the vegetative part, another is the sexual part. Vegetative part means like leaf, like root, like stem. Also these type of parts help in the reproduction. That time this type of reproduction are called the vegetative reproduction. But now today we discuss this structure like the flower. This flower also involved in the reproduction. This is the sexual reproduction of the flowering plants. So flower are the site of sexual reproduction. Why? Because it is mainly the gametophytic structure. That means the gamete are produced in the flower. So the flower, the most important part. So at first we discuss about the structure of the flower. What is the different parts is there in the one flower. But flower and their arrangement, it is called the inflorescence. How the flower are arranged. That means several hormonal and structural changes are happening. Why? Because at first time it is called the floral primordia. After that, due to the hormonal effect, the flower are formed, and so it is some hormonal effect behind it. So inflorescence, that means the arrangement of flower. That means the flower buds and then the flower. Like you also see it in your China rose flower. When it is the bud stage, they are covered with the sepals, but after when they are ultimately mature, their petals are ultimately totally open up and they are in red color, right? So arrangement of flower, that means the inflorescence also take the important role in the sexual reproduction of flowering plants. So most important question, that means the floral primordia. This is the like bud-like structure, from that the flower are produced. So it is the most important part that is we discuss. Next one, that is the structure of the flower. Now is the flower have the main two parts, accessories part and the one is the reproductive part. But accessories part means like the sepals, like the petals. Sepals, what is their function? Their function of the sepals to protect the flower in the bud stage. And what is the function of the petals? Petals, their main function is help to pollination. So indirectly the sepals and petals take the important role of the sexual reproduction, but not directly. Directly involved in the sexual reproduction, that is called the reproductive parts of the flower. It is the two types, that is it is the androecium and the gynoecium. Androecium means, what is the mean by androecium? Androecium means the male part, right? And gynoecium means by the female part. So all of these things we discuss their structure, but today we mainly concentrate about the androecium structure. Clear? So this is the first part. So we discuss the four holes. Also it is when the flower contains the four holes, that time it is called the complete flower. But now today our class on the basis of androecium, that is the most important holes or the parts of the flower. The male reproductive part of the flower is called the androecium, right? In the androecium structure, it ultimately the single unit that is called the stamen, right? Whole structure is called the androecium, but single one unit called the stamen, and their number are varies. So in every species, that is not the constant in all the plants, it is varied plant to plants. So this is the structure, like this is the stamen, and total the structure of the male part is called the androecium. Clear? So single unit, it is called the stamen, and stamen have the two part, anther and filament. This is the filament and this one is called the stamen. So filament or the stamen, stamen means the anther in here, the anther means where the pollen grains are produced. So the stamen have the two part, that means the filament and the anther. So at first, what is the filament? This is the filament structure, long and slender stalk that is mainly attached the anther with the flower other part. So in the proximal end is attached to the thalamus. So it is the thalamus part where the stamen are attached to the flower. It is the thalamus part, right, where the filament are attached. Now we discuss about the structure of anther. That is the most important part. Generally, you know, the anther ultimately is the two lobes. That means they have the two thickers. That means they have the two sides where the pollen grains are produced. That is the two side is there, right? So two thicker. So it is called the dithickers. Di means the two, right? So in here also you observe that the two thickers is there. That means the two chamber is there. Now also we discuss the another part of the androecium. So now we are section the anther. So you will see the internal view of the anther. Now you zoom it and you observe that anther is a tetragonal structure. Tetra means like it have the four part, and four microsporangia located in the corner. This is the microsporangia located in the corner. Each lobe, so it is the one lobe, it is another lobe. So each lobe, how many more microsporangia is there? Are the two microsporangia is there. And from the microsporangia, the pollen sac is ultimately developed. What is mean the pollen sac? It is the main site from where the pollen grains are developed. So microsporangia develop into the pollen sac. They extended ultimately longitudinally all through the length of the anther, are packed with the pollen grains. In here, you know, this is the structure of the pollen sac. This is contain the pollen grains. When they mature, they dehiscence or break down the structure and release the pollen grains. So this is the most important part, that is we discuss the structure of the anther, that is ultimately two lobes and at each corner it is the microsporangia, it is also we called the pollen sac. But in our today class we discuss how the pollen grains are produced, what is the process behind it, right? Microsporogenesis is the process, but what is happening in that particular process also we discuss these things. Now we just ultimately enlarge this picture. In here we see that anther sac is the pollen sac. This is the pollen sac. This is a picture from the NCERT books. This picture is very important for your NCERT by an NEET point of view. This is the microsporangia, right? They have the special type of tissues that is called sporogenous tissue. That means a typical microsporangium near circular in outline, like it is the shape like the circular in nature, like circular disc-like structure. Now it is surrounded by the four wall. In here the four wall is there. Outer wall is called epidermis, next one endotheciums, next one the middle layers, and innermost layer, that is the tapetum. Tapetum is the innermost layer of the pollen sac. So what is the function of these different four layers? So at first you clearly understand that the microsporangia or pollen sac are covered by four layers. What is the four layer? Outer layer, epidermis, next layer is called the middle layer, next layer, endothecium, next layer, middle layer, and the innermost layer are tapetum. So what is the function of that? The outer three layer. So what is the outer three layer? That is the epidermis, endothelium and middle layer. What is the function of this three layer? These three layers ultimately help to protection. That means it is the covering around the pollen sac. So when the anther like in mature stage, pollen grains are mature, that time it is ultimately this type of layer is dehiscence or breakdown and pollen grains are released. So what is the function of the tapetum? Tapetum is the innermost layer, but their function is very important for the NEET point of view. Their function is the nourishment of the pollen grains. So outer three layers, their function is support, protection, but tapetum, their function, this is the tapetum layer, right? This one is the tapetum layer, right? Tapetum layer, innermost layer, nourish and developing of the pollen grains. So that is the most important part. Cells of the tapetum contain dense cytoplasm, generally have more than one nucleus. Very important question it is. That means the tapetum have the multinucleated structure. What is multinucleated structure? This tapetum. When anther is young, that means in immature, that time a group of compactly arranged homogeneous ultimately cells is there, that is called the sporangineous tissue. So inside the tapetum a cluster of cells is there, that is called sporogenous tissue, occupy the center position of the pollen sac. So inside the tapetum a special cell, special tissue is there, that is called the sporogenous tissue. Where it is present? It is present in here is the microsporangium. Microsporangium, also the similar name of the pollen sac. Clear? Now, it is a very easy picture. Pollen sac. In here, the four layers, tapetum innermost layer, and in here, as the anther develop, each cell of the sporangineous tissue, like all of the sporangineous tissue, they have the power to develop the pollen grains. So, but what type of cell division process are involved? The meiotic cell division process are involved. Why? Because at first the mother cell, which is contain the diploid number 2n, but we need the pollen grains which is ultimately haploid in nature. So meiosis process are involved. We already know that in the meiosis process the haploid number containing cells are produced. So from the microspora, it is in the meiosis process, how many cells are produced? 4 cells produced. So from the microspore mother cell, also it is called pollen mother cell, PMC. This is the diploid cell. After meiosis, it is produced 4 cells. These 4 cells are called microspore tetrad. In here, it is ultimately pollen mother cells. After the divisions, you know the 4 cells is there. 1, 2, 3, another opposite side one also be there. So tetrad means the 4 cells. But in here, very important question, microspore tetrad are formed. So each one is potential 2 microspore mother cells. So microspore tetrad means they have the capacity to produce the pollen grains. So that is also be act as a mother cells, because this is the main cells from which the pollen grains are developed. The formation of microspore from a pollen mother cells through the meiosis process is called the microsporogenesis process. What is the name of the process? Microsporogenesis. That means the formation of microspore. And microspore are haploid in nature because it is the involved the meiosis process. Clear? So it is a process, it is happening inside the pollen sac. Next of what we discuss the another part, it is the microsporogenesis. As the anther mature, just like it is the mature anther. The microspore ultimately dehisces from each other and develop the pollen grains. In here, the pollen grains are developed. Now this is the pollen grains. Each microsporangia contains, microsporangia means this is the microsporangia or the pollen sac which contain not a single pollen grains. It is contain the many pollen grains, thousands of pollen grains. They release with the dehiscence of anther, like you see it, it is a dehiscence of anther, then it is released, then it is means the pollen grains are released into the environment. After that, the pollination are happening, the pollen grains is transferred to stigma. But today we discuss how the pollen grains are produced. Next we discuss about the structure of the pollen grains. Pollen grains, it is a male gametophyte. You know, generally it is a spherical in structure. Their diameter is generally 25 to 50 nanometer. The cytoplasm is surrounded by a plasma membrane. Pollen grains have the two layers. Outer layer is called the XII and innermost layer is called the intine. The two layer is there. External layer XII and internal layer is called the intine. So this is the two layer. But at first we discuss what is the structure of the XII. You know, the XII is a very resistive in structure, very hard structure. Why? That is the content the sporopollenin. But what is the sporopollenin? Sporopollenin is a very important structural component of the XII and highly resistive organic material. Different enzymes generally do not degrade the sporopollenin structure. So it can withstand high temperature and strong acid and alkali. Also enzyme cannot ultimately degrade the sporopollenin. For that reason, the pollen grains are very high resistive in nature. They survive long times without germination. So the XII layer, that means this is the outermost thick layer. Clear? It contains sporopollenin. Next one, XII have some spore-like structure where the XII layer is very thin. Why the XII layer is thin in particular position? Because when these pollen grains are fall in the stigma, that time it is their main function is generate the pollen tube. But sporopollenin is very high and very hard structure. So how the pollen tube is ultimately coming to from that ultimately pollen grains? So particular some region is there like the germ pore. In here XII layer is very thin or not present. So this side help to the generation of pollen tube. So these structures are called the germ pore. So pollen grains are ultimately preserved in fossils due to the presence of sporopollenin because they are high ultimately resistive structural material present in the XII. So now we discuss another point of the pollen grain structure. This structure is very important. So we discuss the external layer. Now we discuss the internal layer of the pollen grains. So external layer is hard, sporopollenin content, but the innermost layer is called the intine. But most important, it is the comparatively thin layer. But contains a layer which chemicals? It is the most important. XII layer contain sporopollenin. Intine layer, it is contain the cellulose and the pectin. It is a very important question in NEET point of view. XII, sporopollenin, intine, cellulose and pectin. This is, we complete the layers. Now we go inside the pollen grains. You observe that inside the pollen grains, the two cells is there. One is called the vegetative cell. Another cells, it is called generative cells. So what is the difference between? You can easily observe that it is vegetative cell are bigger, and because why it is bigger inside? Because they reserve the food material and large irregular shape nucleus in the vegetative cell. It is help the formation of pollen tube. This is the vegetative cell. Now we discuss the generative cell. It is the small and floats in the cytoplasm of the vegetative cell. Very small structure, spindle shape ultimately nucleus is present in the generative cell. So inside the pollen grains, two type of cell is there, vegetative cell and the generative cell. Vegetative cell is bigger, generative cell is the small. Generative cells have the very important nucleus which is mainly participate into the fertilization process. But if you observe the angiosperm, 60% of the angiosperm, the pollen grains are generally in the two cell stage, vegetative cells and generative cell. But the others, that means like 40%, cells ultimately have the three cell stage. But what is the meaning by the three cell stage? In here, vegetative cell, their number is 1. But generative cells have divided into the 2. Right? So that time it is called the pollen grains is 3 cell stage. But maximum, that means 60% of the angiosperm contain 2 cell stage. It is the most important event. Now the 3 cell stage is not the so common compared to 2 cell stage. So this is ultimately pollen grains, their structure. Now we discuss about the pollen grains, ultimately what is their importance. When they ultimately pollen grains land on the stigma, that time before ultimately they lose the viability. It is most important, otherwise the pollen grains have no importance. But viability period is ultimately differ into the different pollen grains. Like you know, that is the viability of pollen grains of the some cereals like rice, like wheat, only 30 minutes. If in the 30 minutes pollen grains do not get the land of the stigma, so their viability is lost. Which type of plant are exhibit like? This is the rice or wheat. But you know, some member of the leguminous plant. What is in the leguminous plant? Like the pea, like the beans. In here, the pollen grains viability. The leguminous plants, also some Rosaceae and Solanaceae plants. This is very important. 3 part is there. Also, it is important in your NEET question. Their viability had for months, but monocotyledonous plants, their pollen grains viability generally are 30 minutes. Show the pollen grains and their viability. We already discussed the structure of the pollen grains and their viability. Now we discuss another point of the pollen grains, that means the importance of pollen grains. Pollen grains have the beneficial and harmful significance in our society. So we discuss one by one. At first, the good importance, beneficial importance. They are rich in nutrients. So the pollen tablets are used, which is ultimately act as a food supplement. Why? Because pollen grains or pollen tablets, they are contain different type of proteins, minerals that is very helpful to the growth of the body. So pollen tablets and syrup increase the performance of athletes and the race horse because their energy and power level are increased. So as a NEET student, you also take the pollen tablets, so your energy are ultimately increased, so you are doing your best in the NEET, right? So another, it is also your food supplement, right? Okay. But another important case, that pollen grains can be stored for future use, but how you store it? In the liquid nitrogen minus 96 degrees Celsius, it is called the cryopreservation technique. Right? It is help for the hybridization or crop breeding. But now we discuss the disadvantage of the pollen grains. That means some pollen grains like the parthenium or the carrot grass, it have the capacity to produce the allergy. Why? These plants grow very fast and their flower are ultimately number very enormous, and they produce a large number of pollen grains. If someone have some allergies from that pollen grains, so that time is very problem that particular persons. So parthenium or the carrot gas ultimately produce the allergy for some people. It leads ultimately the chronic respiratory disorder like the asthma. So which persons have this type of allergy problem, they must be ultimately wear the masks to prevent this type of allergy. So today we discuss the male part, that means the androecium structure, like the structure of the stamen. Next we discuss about how the pollen grains are produced and where the pollen grains are produced, that is the pollen sac structure and structure of the anther. And next we discuss the very important part of our unity, that is the structure of the pollen grains. Their outer wall, inner wall, that means the extine and intine and internal cells, vegetative cell and the generative cells, and their viability. And finally we discuss the significance of the pollen grains. So very easy and very important part your NEET you already completed. So please now you read the NCERT book. Clear? Very thoroughly and very every point you remember and understand from the NCERT books, right? After that you write a short note, and next you doing the 25 MCQs from that particular topic. So you are the master. After you doing this, you are the masters of this particular topic, the androecium. Clear? So today our class from that ultimately end. So if any doubt, please you write in the comment section. We discuss this part in the next class, right? Another one, if you in this class are helpful to you, if you understand this topic easily, so you please like the chapter, like our video and subscribe the channel, right? So you easily ultimately help the other people to help your friend as by the sharing of this video, so they also will learn from their home and get a seat of the MBBS and be a good doctor, which is the help the all the person. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, see you in the next class. Thank you.